would serve captivity, slave ships. Who are these people? You can't say the Jewish people are the Jews. They're not the Jews. They're not suffering the curses according to the Bible. How can they be the Jews and they run everything you see today? The Bible said the Jews would feel no curse. The Jews would go in and cargo stations and serve all other nations. This is what you will not learn in religion. That the poor people in the Bible are actually the people of the Bible. You cannot learn this in your religion.
COINTELPRO stands for Counterintelligence Program, which was primarily run by the FBI as a covert action program against domestic dissidents, the use of infiltration, psychological warfare, harassment through the legal system, and the use of extralegal force and violence, including murder, probably began in the 1950s and is now a permanent feature of U.S. government. Targets included the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the anti-war movement, the environmental movement, opposition political parties, and basically any progressive group in American society. The most prominent target of COINTELPRO in the 1960s was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who received a blackmail letter from J. Edgar Hoover that detailed evidence of Dr. King's extramarital affairs and suggested he should suicide himself to preclude the release of the material to the press and its negative effect it would have on his family and his civil rights movement. The surveillance of Dr. King included the 112th Military Intelligence Unit and the use of U-2 spy planes to take photographs. Dr. King was marked, barely a month before his murder, for elimination as a potential messiah who could unify and electrify the black movement. The FBI planned to replace him, quote, in his role of the leadership of the Negro people, unquote, with conservative black lawyer Samuel Pierce, who was later named to Ronald Reagan's cabinet.
We knew at the time there was a conspiracy. We knew it was planned. We knew it was coordinated. We just had no idea how sophisticated the plan or how sophisticated the coordination was and or the collaboration between the various agencies. We didn't know it was called COINTELPRO, that involved the Department of Defense, it involved the White House, it involved the CIA and the FBI in coordination. We didn't know all that, but we knew they were doing these things against us. They were doing them deliberately, and we knew that they were wrong. There was an explanation for why our housing was bad, our education was poor, our political power was limited, and that explanation was that we were held as colonial subjects within the United States. It's not a perfect explanation. It's an analogy to situations in Africa and in Asia that we could see that fit us. Therefore, colonialism had been denounced by the United Nations, and people were entitled to their independence, and they were justified in breaking out of that type of control. That was the basic American history.
At the high point of FBI involvement with the Klan, 1 out of 4 Klansmen was an FBI agent. So a lot, if not all, of Ku Klux Klan policy and actions were being directed by or acquiesced in by the FBI. And this led to the FBI and its COINTELPRO program and its other racially oriented programs actually being implicated in and instigating crimes, civil rights crimes, murders and such things. The Birmingham church bombing, the assassination of the civil rights workers, the Freedom Riders.
Well, you see, the media has played its traditional role. The white-owned, white-controlled media has played its traditional role back then and today. And their traditional role is to maintain the status quo. Status quo meaning white folks on top, black people on the bottom. So the media did the interpreting of what was going on. And they interpreted everything in the light of how it would impact upon the maintenance of the status quo. Still do it.
They were able to put a cover on the movement as best as they saw fit through COINTELPRO, and the best way was to keep it quiet. Even today, don't talk about it, because it still exists.
What's happening here in America is that our government inadvertently supplying the hard drugs to the people in this country, then they're putting the people who use them in this country in jail.
I think the prevailing view on Wall Street is anyone stupid enough to buy drugs deserves to die. And if you can make money from them while they're doing it, that's great. And if that's imposing a crime wave on a community away from Wall Street, that's okay. There's no drug crime on Wall Street.
I don't like it. They pay cash, right? They pay cash.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I worked South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
And how tough security's gotten since 9/11, it's like really like, you know, how the drugs coming into the United States now, how? I mean, you know, I don't have an airplane, you know, I don't have a car that's going to make it with California plates to Mexico and back to Colombia. I can't even drive to Colombia.
Yeah, so it gotta be flown.
I don't have a boat.
It gotta be flown or shipped.
There's a great line in the movie Boys in the Hood where Larry Fishburne is saying, hey man, we don't grow it, we don't own any airplanes, we don't have any laboratories. How does it get here? Why does it get here? And that's a very good common sense approach that intuitively the people in South Central understood, that there was something much bigger than them that was moving the whole drug issue and the drug war.
After Freeway Rick was arrested, an investigative journalist by the name of Gary Webb uncovered a link that connected him back to the Nicaraguan Contra movement.
So I read Dark Alliance. I got a copy personally from Gary Webb himself. And to read the book, it was fascinating for me, you know, to find out that I was connected with the CIA and all these high-powered people up in the government.
Ricky Ross was just lucky. He just happened to get a source who was connected to the CIA.
According to Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, when Danilo Blandón was displaced from his home country of Nicaragua, he set off to America to raise money to aid the Contras in ridding his home from the invading Sandinistas. When Ricky Ross was introduced to Blandón, Blandón was in a position to create a pipeline of cocaine that he in turn gave to Ricky Ross on consignment. Blandón was in a position to create a pipeline of cocaine that he in turn gave to Ricky Ross on consignment.
Which I like the sound of that, you know, because I was always trying to get to the top anyway.
Suddenly, some major sources opened up for him. Danilo Blandón, Norwin Meneses, both of whom were tied to the CIA and the Contras, and Gary Webb did a masterful job of breaking those stories and proving with documents that that was the case.
Whatever we were running in LA, the profit it was going to the Contra-Revolution.
I started doing a little research on my own, and I read a little bit about Oliver North and the Contras, because I never knew what the Contras was before.
There's ledgers of Oliver North and them actually transporting the cocaine to our country. There's film. Every piece of document that's possible.
One of the most paramount moments, perhaps caused by Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, took place in November of 1996.
It was a monumental historic event. I mean, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency was coming to Watts to face the people.
Now, we all know that the U.S. government and the CIA supported the Contras in their efforts to overthrow the Sandinista government in Nicaragua in the middle 80s. Now it is alleged the CIA also helped the Contras raise money for arms by introducing crack cocaine into California.
Deutsch felt he had to do something to try to deal with the outrage that was foaming all over the country at the time. And of course, it just blew up in his face.
CIA fights drugs, CIA does not encourage drugs.
I mean, it was actually one of the most monumental blunders of all time, if you think about it.
We have no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA to engage in encouraging drug traffickers in Nicaragua or elsewhere in Latin America.
Deutsch was there because of the Gary Webb stories. The Gary Webb stories had sparked a national furor.
I would like to have Richie Ross's brother to speak, please.
The United States government turned their head and let this cocaine come into the United States of America.
Allow Gary Webb to have full access. This whole thing is orchestrated.
I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, and I work South Central Los Angeles, and I will tell you, Director Deutsch, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. And I was able to name operations. Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. He stumbled and stammered and wrung his hands.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department.
And of course my response was, I started there 18 years ago, sir, and they tried to kill me. Now what do you want me to do? The average person in South Central Los Angeles did not know anything about really how the CIA worked. They had an intuitive sense.
You have a private network run by George Bush and Ollie North, not the CIA. You won't find the records in the CIA. They're not there. They're in these privatized intelligence agencies. Will you pursue that? Will you pursue Ollie North and George Bush and the massive documentation? All these gentlemen, like this gentleman here, the co-defendant of Ricky Ross.
They needed the money to finance the war in Nicaragua. They had the link. We know that from records now that they sent Blandon, who was a CIA operative, CIA, to school for marketing the product which we now know is cocaine.
I already knew that from the beginning of dealing with Danilo Blandon that he was sending supplies and things of that nature, computers and guns to Nicaragua to fight a war.
Ricky had already served a 5.5-year sentence for dealing crack, but was now given a second 20-year sentence after being set up by his former partner Blandon, while Oliver North walked away as a hero, wealthy and free to try his hand at politics.
With major task force investigations of Freeway Ricky Ross, they had search warrants for 19 locations that were prepared one night, and by the time they got there the next morning, all 16 locations had been cleared out. And that means that obviously there was a leak. That's the way the CIA protects its share of the drug trade.
Just one night, I got a tip from Danilo not to go over, and just so happened to be the night that they raided.
Now, I don't understand why the government didn't use Freeway Rick the way they used him. Set him up to go buy it from the big man and bust the big man. They know he ain't the big man. Somebody's bringing it to him.
Yeah, nobody's. So
why they didn't reverse it?
They always take you almost
to make it seem like he's the man.
They never.
But somebody's just bringing it to him.
Who is the real drug lord?
We understand what you're saying. A ton of cocaine was smuggled into the United States of America.
Well,
in cooperation with the CIA?
That's exactly what appears to have happened.